David Storm, a famous writer, is driving through an isolated road on a foggy night, struggling with his GPS. He's anxious, confused, and unsure of where he's headed. As the car rumbles along the desolate road, David grips the wheel tightly, looking back and forth between the road and his flickering GPS screen. As David continues down the road, he spots a grand mansion looming in the distance, bathed in an eerie red light. Its large structure and strange, unsettling aura make him pause. Curiosity draws him closer. Despite the feeling that something is off, David finally decides to step into the mansion, hoping for help. The interior is dark, cold, and filled with dust, and the faint red glow from outside gives it an unnatural feel. The antique furniture covered in sheets adds to the oppressive atmosphere. David cautiously steps through the mansion, trying to make sense of his situation, his unease growing. As David moves through the house, strange noises begin to echo from the dark corners, whispers, creaks, and faint footsteps. He stops in his tracks, his ears straining to catch the source of the sound. A chill runs down his spine as he realizes he's not alone. Suddenly, a dark figure emerges from the shadows. David freezes in terror, his eyes locked on the figure, which remains still and unmoving. His heart pounds in his chest as he tries to make sense of this apparition. A woman appears, dressed in a long black gown, her face pale and expressionless. She moves toward David silently, her eyes glowing faintly red. David steps back in fear, unsure of her intentions. David finds himself in a narrow, long hallway with walls covered in strange symbols. The floor creaks under his weight as he walks, and the temperature drops significantly. He feels a presence behind him and turns, but no one is there. As David moves deeper into the mansion, the red light grows stronger. The walls seem to pulse with the glow, and strange whispers fill the air. He feels as though the house itself is alive, watching him. David looks into a dusty, antique mirror and sees his own reflection, but something is wrong. His reflection begins to distort, taking on a sinister form. He steps back in shock, unsure of what he's seeing. Suddenly, David feels a cold hand grab his wrist. He spins around, but there's no one there. His heart races, and he frantically looks around, feeling the grip tighten. As David attempts to escape through the back door, it slams shut with a deafening noise. He stumbles backward, his fear escalating. The mansion seems to be trapping him inside. David steps into a room where the floor is stained with dark red, as though something violent has happened. His eyes widen in horror as he looks down, unsure of what he's seeing. David hears a soft, ghostly voice calling his name from the darkness. He freezes in place, straining his ears to hear more. The voice grows louder, almost beckoning him forward, but David remains rooted in fear. As David turns a corner, he feels a cold breeze brush against his face. He quickly looks around, but sees no one. The air feels thick with an unseen presence, and his skin prickles with fear. David stumbles into a room filled with old, haunting portraits. The painted eyes of the subjects seem to follow him as he moves, sending a chill down his spine. He can't help but feel like the people in the portraits are alive and watching him. David stops for a moment, trying to calm himself, but then he hears a faint heartbeat echoing through the house. It grows louder and faster, making him panic. He looks around, unable to locate the source. While exploring, David finds a hidden door behind a bookshelf. He hesitates, feeling the weight of the house's oppressive presence, but then he opens it. A dark, narrow passageway leads deeper into the mansion. With a deep breath, he steps inside. As David moves through the passage, he hears soft crying coming from ahead. His fear intensifies, but his curiosity pushes him forward. He rounds a corner and finds a room where the crying is coming from a dark figure huddled in the corner. The figure turns around, revealing a ghostly face with hollow eyes. David stumbles back in shock, but the figure doesn't move. It simply stares at him with a sad, pleading expression. Suddenly, the passageway's door slams shut behind David, trapping him inside. He panics and tries to open it, but it won't budge. The room seems to close in on him, the walls getting closer. The lights in the room flicker erratically, casting shadows across the walls. David's heart races as he hears the faint sound of footsteps approaching from the darkness. He backs away slowly, looking for an escape. David discovers a hidden room behind a false wall. The door creaks open, revealing a room full of old, dusty books and strange artifacts. He hesitates, but enters, feeling that something important lies within. In the center of the room, David finds a dusty old book on a pedestal. He opens it, and the pages are filled with strange, cryptic symbols. As he reads, the room begins to feel colder, and the lights flicker more intensely. David suddenly hears loud, maniacal laughter coming from the walls. His blood runs cold as the sound echoes through the room. He looks around frantically, trying to figure out where it's coming from. As David stares into the mirror in the room, he sees a dark figure standing behind him. He turns quickly, but there's no one there. He looks back at the mirror, but the figure remains. Suddenly, the floor beneath David gives way, and he falls through a trapdoor. He crashes to the ground below, stunned and injured. He groans in pain, trying to gather his senses. David wakes up in a dark underground chamber. The air is thick and heavy. He stands, feeling his way through the dark, his pulse quickening with fear. Strange symbols cover the walls, glowing faintly in the dark. David confronts the ghostly figure once more. The figure speaks to him, revealing dark secrets about the mansion and its history. David stands his ground, refusing to back down. The atmosphere grows tense, as though a final battle is looming. David sees a faint light in the distance and runs towards it, desperate to escape the mansion. As he nears the door, the ground shakes and the walls close in. He reaches the exit, barely escaping as the mansion crumbles behind him. Finally, David steps out into the night, breathless but alive. He looks back at the mansion, which now seems abandoned and lifeless. The red lights are gone, and the eerie aura fades. He feels a sense of relief, but he knows the nightmare will haunt him forever.